What if Kakashi was Gojo's reincarnation? I've seen the comparisons all over social media. I'm pretty sure you guys have too. And even the author of Jujutsu Kaisen and Naruto, both are actually pretty big fans of each other's works. I mean, they always make those similar connections. I mean, they're both senseis, they're both badass, they both cover their eyes, or eye. And so I figured, why not make this a video? Just before we get started, I really just want to preface this by saying that this is not a video to be taken seriously, just a little bit of a fanficky thing. So if you go on to enjoy it, make sure to smash that like button, seeing as it helps a ton with YouTube's algorithm. And that being said, I hope you guys go on to enjoy the What If.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Where should I start this video off? I'm going to be 100% transparent with you guys and just tell you that I have not looked at any script. I just woke up today and decided to make this video, so I got some art made for it and I sat down in my chair and just was like, all right. You know what? Now that I think about it, I know exactly where I want to start. We're taking this story. No, this story is taking place the moment where Kakashi, Obito, and Rin were fighting against ninjas from the hidden mist village. I believe it was the moment where Obito was crushed by the rocks. We all remember how this happened. And Gojo, no, not Gojo, but Kakashi essentially almost being crushed by rocks had it not been for Obito's intervention. What ends up happening this time around is going to be a lot different from what usually happened in the original. I mean, this Kakashi at this point is already, I believe, 13 years old, if not 14. And no, he's not even 13 or 14, but he is pretty young. He's like 12 years old. He just became a genin, and he's already taking place in the Third Great Shinobi World War. So we have to acknowledge the fact that Kakashi is not just going to be essentially letting some rocks crush him. He has the six eyes this time around, and they're able to enhance his perception enough for Kakashi to essentially jump out of the way and say, "Obito, stop!" before Obito was able to jump in and push him out of the way. This leads Obito and Kakashi to essentially be split in the cave, where Obito is trapped behind a pillar of a bunch of rocks, and Kakashi would be as well. Him knowing that he wasn't going to be able to topple them over with nothing but physical raw strength, essentially went on to look towards the rocks before he then proceeded to say, "Blue." And suddenly, all the rocks began moving towards the direction of Kakashi, to the point where they all essentially went kind of close, and then he said, "Red." As suddenly, they all kind of just got dispersed everywhere, and this small orb of red energy just pretty much blasted all those rocks to oblivion. Obito was then able to get back with Kakashi, and all of them were able to essentially, how do I put this? They were able to essentially survive and make it out of there, with Kakashi not having his eye cut due to the fact that he has the ability of Limitless, aka Infinity, because of the fact that he has Gojo's six eyes. So what ends up happening is basically why do I keep saying? Okay, look guys, if I say Gojo and Kakashi, just know I mean Kakashi, okay? That said though, what ends up happening is essentially they go on to essentially continue devastating in this war, with the added addition of Kakashi having not only chakra but also cursed energy. He is able to become a big, huge team player to the Third Great Shinobi World War. When in original, he already was a big player, having the ability of the Sharingan, where he earned the name the Copycat Ninja Kakashi. This time, he ends up earning the name of Limitless Kakashi, or Untouchable Kakashi, or whatever. And basically, he becomes very powerful. This in and of itself ends up causing a huge ripple effect in the timeline, because now Madara does not have somebody to essentially start the creation of the Akatsuki like he would in the original. Because since Kakashi and Obito both lived, Rin is never going to essentially get the tail beast implanted inside her, so Kakashi never ends up having to touch her heart with the Chidori. And what that leads to is Rin, Obito, and Kakashi making their way back to the village. This time around, Kakashi doesn't have to deal with the guilt of him killing Rin or feeling as if Obito was taken away from him. So that darkness that allowed him the ability to join the Anbu is not present, meaning he never ends up meeting Itachi. So when Itachi goes to the Anbu, those events kind of stay the same, except missions are just a tad bit harder because the Anbu captain isn't Kakashi. When it comes to Obito and Rin, those two eventually end up hitting it off once Rin ends up realizing that Kakashi doesn't really like her. She ends up giving Obito a chance, and through Obito trying his hard and being persistent, he was able to make his way out of the friend zone. I know how unrealistic this sounds, but it's a fanfic and I can do what I want. So yeah. So from here, Obito and Rin were able to slowly start that relationship that they had in canon, and Obito never became ugly. We know that Obito's dream was to become the next Hokage, and so eventually by the time that Naruto would have gone on to be born and Fugaku would have become Wicked Eye Fugaku, the Nine Tails incident happening in the village, that ends up changing a lot in its entirety because Kakashi is around. And what I mean by that is once the Nine Tails begins attacking, Kakashi is actually one of the first ninjas to actually arrive on the scene. And with him arriving in the scene, he is actually able to be present in the very moment when his master, Kakashi, loses his life. Him being present in this moment is actually one of the huge catalysts to why Kakashi is going to be the way he is later on. He is watching as his mentor tells him to stay back, don't destroy Kurama, we need him, and he goes on to seal the Nine Tails Jinchuriki into Naruto. So Naruto was forced to grow up in the way that he grew up in canon, while he was forced to watch Kushina and his master both lose his lives in the heat of the battle. Kakashi is utterly decimated. Actually, now that I realize that Kakashi's addition being there on the scene could actually mean that him being in the way would not have allowed Kurama to actually get close to Naruto, so Kushina would have to throw her body there. So this is actually a good thing for Naruto. This time around, he's raised with his mother, and even though Naruto has the Nine Tails Jinchuriki, his mother is there to be like, look Naruto, like I can help you. So from here, we're going to just fast forward through all these years until eventually Kakashi becomes a Jonin sensei. He, Obito, and Rin actually become Jonin senseis, and Obito is actually going to be responsible for the team that Kurenai was in charge of, and Rin is going to be responsible for some random background team that nobody cares about, because I don't really like Rin, but Obito does. And Obito surviving means I have to do this man at least a little favor. That said though, what I believe ends up happening following these events with Naruto actually having a mother around is that Naruto never ends up being outcasted as the Nine Tails Jinchuriki. Because with Kushina being around and Danzo beginning spreading rumors like, oh, Naruto's the Nine Tails Jinchuriki, did you guys know that? Kushina's not having it. She goes straight to Hiruzen and tells him that unless she wants her wrath on him, he better silence those rumors. Hiruzen goes out publicly and begins stating that that's a lie, and goes on to actually remove the root organization from Danzo so that Danzo's influence in the village starts to become kind of like secretive, just like it would in the original. I mean, it doesn't do anything. But one good thing that comes out of it is Naruto has somebody to train him and understands that feeling of Kurama constantly messing with your chakra. Kushina is the perfect mentor for Naruto, and this time around Naruto actually ends up learning the Adamantian Uzumaki chains, which Naruto's going to be taking full advantage of, and he's actually going to be way more skilled in chakra control taijutsu, meaning that this Naruto's actually going to be at the top of his class, second in terms of rankings, because of the fact that he slacks off in his education. Even though Kushina tries her best to save him, what is she gonna do? A mother can only do so much. Eventually though, it would be revealed that Naruto is inevitably stronger than Sasuke, and the Team 7 would still be built just like it would be in canon. Sakura, Sasuke, Kakashi, and Naruto are all put on that team. Kushina, on their first day of the bell test, would actually end up bringing Naruto a full box of food, saying to eat this, and actually bringing a box for that of Sasuke as well as Sakura, smiling at them and letting them know that they better eat. because when she was a kid, she didn't get that chance and it sucked, saying that the one who they're gonna have to fight against right now is not playing no games. So she would look at them and proceed to be like, good luck guys, and from here Kakashi would finally reveal himself from hiding in some random bush. When Kakashi arrives, he says, she gave you food, didn't she? And they reveal that yeah, they ate pretty good. Kakashi would tell them, whatever, and from here he goes on to explain to them the rules of the bell test, explaining that all they have to do is take these 2 bells from him, and that one of them will be sent back to the academy and tied to a pole while they watch the other 2 eat more food. Kakashi would then go on to explain that they have until 5 in the afternoon to try to take these bells from him, and the team would look towards their direction of each other before then saying, how do we do this? Isn't Kakashi like one of the strongest shinobi in the entire village? This isn't fair. How are we gonna beat him? Sasuke shrugs and just goes on to say that they better get out of his way, looking to Naruto before glaring at him due to the fact that he just doesn't like Naruto. This time around, they don't have that connection of both of them being lonely because Naruto actually got to grow up with a motherly figure. And Naruto this time around isn't the same goofball that he was in the original, or at least not as much. He still retains some fragments and bits of that same personality because let's be honest here, that personality that Naruto has is just so infectious. I love it personally. I know it's not for everybody, but me personally, I love part 1 Naruto's personality. It's just so funny and infectious and just goofy. So we're going to be keeping that around. Kakashi's personality is essentially going to be the same one that he has in canon, with a little bit of added cockiness and a little bit more humor thrown in the mix. He's still going to be as charismatic as the normal Kakashi is, and when it comes to him fighting against the students for the bell test, he essentially goes on to obliterate them. He understands they're not going to touch the bell because they simply can't. The barrier of infinity is between their hands and the bells that are strapped to his waist. They're never going to touch them no matter what they do. However, they still end up passing due to the fact that Kushina told Naruto a long time ago that a Genin squad will never work without teamwork. And Naruto would remember that, just thinking, teamwork, that's it. He looks to Sakura and then tells her that the point of this exercise is probably teamwork. My mom was trying to hint that to me. I can't believe I didn't catch it until now. He would look to Sasuke and say, look Sasuke, I know we have our differences, but we're not touching those bells. He literally stood still while you shot a fireball jutsu at him. We're not touching him. Sasuke gritted his teeth and would think, you're right, Naruto. And from here, all 3 of them decided whatever, teamwork is better than no teamwork. So Sasuke and Naruto both ran in, with Naruto jumping in with taijutsu while Sasuke shot a fireball at him, and Sakura went in with shuriken, just throwing them in Kakashi's direction. Kakashi went on to catch all the shuriken within his finger and then say, you guys passed. He was happy about it, and he then thought about how good that finale was because he was gonna fail them. He would then look to Naruto, who would have a chivish smile on his face, and he would say, you knew the point, didn't you? Naruto rubs the back of his head and says, I had a little bit of help from somebody. Kakashi would kind of facepalm and then look to Kushina, who was just watching nearby. From here, we see Kakashi say, look Naruto, I love your mom too. She pretty much was one of the people that raised me. But you can't be getting all your hints from your mother. He looks to Kushina and tells her, Kushina, stop helping Naruto. And she would just be like, I can't help it, motherly instinct. Kakashi just is like, whatever. And from here, eventually they go on 2 weeks worth of worthless missions. Until eventually, the Tazuna mission would end up happening. Now, I see no real reason for anything to change other than when Kakashi gets destroyed by the apparent demon brothers, Naruto is actually able to act up due to the fact that he's had proper training. So he and Sasuke were able to dispose of the demon brothers both, and Sakura never ended up having to almost get killed. So Kakashi, watching from afar, was actually very impressed by this and went on to press Tazuna about the real ranking of this mission. He went on to explain everything, and the team ended up deciding that they'll go forth with the mission. Eventually, a thick fog would arrive and cue Zabuza's introduction. When Kakashi looks towards Zabuza, Kakashi would see Zabuza on the sword, as Zabuza would think to himself if he's truly ready to engage untouchable Kakashi. He would look at him before saying, Kakashi, I've heard many stories about you. I can't wait to see if they're true or not. Kakashi looks at Zabuza, who's up on top of the sword, and he just looks at him before rubbing his head and saying, "Look, you have one shot. I'm on a C rank mission. If you attack this bridge builder, then I'm gonna have to kill you. You leave now, I might let you live." From here, Zabuza would say, "Fine then. What should I go for first? Your ribs? Your this?" And then he doesn't even get to finish the third thing that he would point out about saying that how many ways he could kill him. Before Kakashi just went on to essentially look at Zabuza and put him under his domain expansion, which just leaves Zabuza in a state of literal vegetableness. Zabuza drops to the ground like a bag of potatoes, and Haku jumps in and grabs Zabuza, running away, claiming to be a tracking ninja from the Hidden Mist village. Then going on to essentially take Zabuza away and quote unquote heal him, only to find out that Zabuza was unresponsive. That technique that Kakashi used destroyed him in a mental level. Zabuza is never going to be the same person he was again. Haku, realizing this, would be like, "Master," and he would be bloodlusted. So one day when they're all on the bridge doing their thing, they're fixing it up after Kakashi, of course, ended up teaching Sasuke and Sakura the methods of tree walking. He essentially ended up arriving at the bridge and placing Kakashi under the Ice Crystal Mirror Jutsu alongside the entirety of Team 7 and Tazuna. Haku went on to shoot from mirror to mirror, with Kakashi just looking around, taking off his headband from his eyes, and then going on to look at Haku as he watches in slow motion as Haku jumps from one mirror to another. But what Kakashi would do is essentially use blue to pull Haku towards him by the neck in a similar fashion to what Pain does, before then with that same hand using purple to eradicate Haku from the entire area. He then looks at the team before asking, "We all right? Is everybody okay?" And everyone just looks at him in absolute shock. Kakashi just one-shotted these two ninjas. He is way too broken. I mean, Kakashi has over 1,000 jutsus, not to mention he has cursed energies and all the abilities that Gojo would have in the original. He is absolutely insane. This man is at his peak when it comes to how powerful he's potentially going to be getting. When it comes to all of the other teams that would have been fighting in the original, they're all doing pretty good for themselves. And Obito was one of the only people who could actually fight against Kakashi on somewhat even terms, due to the fact that he has his Mangekyo Sharingan ability, which he would have developed on a later mission, and he's able to use the abilities of that of Kamui. So it's able to kind of counteract Kakashi's infinity quote unquote jutsu, which isn't really a jutsu just because they don't know it's really cursed energy. That said though, what ends up basically happening is they're able to GG the entirety of the Land of the Waves saga, which now leads us to the next part, which is the Chunin exams. Now the Chunin exams don't really go too different. I mean, Naruto still ends up bumping into Konohamaru as well as the Suna squad, and their interaction still happens just like in canon, with Rock Lee and Sasuke's fight still happening, and Naruto not even getting the chance to fight Lee before, Kai would arrive and end up telling them that, he's Kakashi's rival alongside Obito's, and they're all like, yeah, pretty fast. From here, they go on to go take the exam, and they end up making their way towards the Forest of Death, where eventually they run into that of Orochimaru. They still end up surviving due to similar terms that happen just like in canon, and eventually Sasuke would end up waking up with the power of his curse mark to break one of the Sound Genin's arms and show him that he ain't no, PUSSY. It's not like that. He not no internet shooter. If y'all get that reference, then comment it down below. That said though, what ends up basically happening following these events is once they make their way back and Kakashi notices the curse mark on Sasuke's neck, following the events of him healing it and him actually healing Sasuke, if you guys remember back in the original, Orochimaru, I'm pretty sure at this moment, if not a little later in canon, ended up revealing himself to that of Kakashi via wanting to take Sasuke's body, while Kakashi was I'm not sure, but you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Like Orochimaru pressed Kakashi, and Kakashi was like, get out of here unless you want to die. And you know, following the altercation, Kakashi was like, I can't believe I just did that. Like, he would have ripped me limb from limb. That's basically what happens, except what happens this time around is Kakashi's able to completely and utterly outclass Orochimaru. He blitzes towards his direction and in Gojo-like fashion just begins to beat this man in pure taijutsu ability, speed, and physicality. He is able to pretty much put this man in the weight room and destroy Orochimaru, inevitably using purple to get rid of him as a whole. So after these events, Kakashi essentially had to wait for a curse mark to eventually go crazy enough to the point where he could jump out of it. And the Sound 4, ended up essentially being those people who brought him back. With Orochimaru realizing that Kakashi's in the village, he essentially ends up pulling out of the attack on Konoha thing that he was originally going to be doing. Just cause it didn't work in the original, why would it work now that he has a shinobi such as Kakashi around that could just obliterate him in and of itself? I mean, it's not fair. So what ends up basically happening is soon as shinobi end up pretty much getting out of the entirety of the thing following the 1 month training arc, because the attack on the village never ends up happening. That said, following the Chunin exams, what ends up essentially happening is Naruto would end up meeting Sasuke in the finals of it. And this final battle would actually be extremely interesting to watch, because during the 1 month of training that Naruto would have had with Jiraiya, Naruto's learning of the summoning jutsu would have been a lot faster than it was in the original, as well as his control over KCM1, not KCM1, but Kurama Chakra, but his one tail state is a lot better than you guys might expect, because Kushina, the previous Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, is actually the one teaching him. So Naruto already has that down, meaning that during this 1 month time skip, Naruto's actually able to take his time and learn the abilities of the Rasengan, with Sasuke unlocking the Sharingan alongside Kakashi and learning a bunch of new taijutsu attacks from Kakashi himself, not from Lee, from Kakashi. This ends up meaning that both of them kind of equal each other out slightly, just due to the fact that Naruto's Rasengan would inevitably destroy Sasuke if they were to clash. So what I end up picturing ends up happening during this battle is they start off firstly by rushing each other with taijutsu attacks. They blatantly match each other somewhat when it comes to the taijutsu department, and eventually Sasuke begins trying to use jutsus against Naruto, which Naruto's able to jump in and out of the way, create a bunch of clones that begin slowly overwhelming Sasuke, to the point where he has to activate his Sharingan, and Naruto's aware that things are getting serious. He immediately begins getting more and more power to come into himself from the influence of the Nine Tails, and as soon as that one tail is around himself, he's able to essentially blitz Sasuke and end up beating him to the point where he's actually able to knock Sasuke out before he even has the ability or chance to even whip out that of the Chidori. He never even ends up having to use the Uzumaki chains on Sasuke, and their battle was actually a very impressive one, which shocked the nation heavily. Hiruzen, following this, goes on to offer Jiraiya the position of Kage, which he inevitably declines, and this time around, keep in mind, Obito was basically one of the only founders of the Akatsuki group. Had it not been for Obito's interference, I don't believe that the Akatsuki would have been formed. Hold on, let me just research it real quick. I'll be right back. Just because I don't want to be wrong and then have people in the comments telling me, oh, you're wrong about this, bro. The Akatsuki. It's so annoying. I'll be right back. No, okay, yeah, I was completely right in saying that the Akatsuki wouldn't exactly form, because Obito was kind of pulling strings in the background, and while the Akatsuki was formed by Yahiko, Nagato, and Konan for fighting off the treacheries of what was happening on in the war, what I think ends up happening due to Obito not joining is that the goals of the Akatsuki actually differ a bit from what they would in the original. Not only that, but they don't have access to the statue that can actually hold the abilities of the nine-tailed beasts inside of them. So their goal of going after the nine-tailed Jinchurikis is not a thing. That doesn't happen. Not only that, but not to mention that another thing that would actually change in this version that I completely overlooked was Obito's survival and eventual not helping of the eradication of the Akatsuki. Because Obito, if you guys didn't know, was the one responsible for killing all the women and children. So essentially the Akatsuki massacre was actually helped out by other members that, you know, had to essentially get their hands dirty and help out with the eventual takedown of the Uchiha. Because Itachi, because wait, no, because Obito would have been there. Obito would have been there. So the Uchiha massacre, it wouldn't have happened. Obito was not about to let the group go to war with the village just because he wants to become Kage. He's not gonna dirty the Uchiha name. Holy wow, this is crazy. If you guys commented something beforehand being like, oh my god, you completely forgot this, Obito being alive does this, sorry that I barely acknowledged it. I went into this guns blazing instead of thinking things through, and you know, it happens, but at least I'm acknowledging it now, right? Right? Maybe? No? Yeah? Okay. Anyways though, with Obito actually being there, I don't think the Uchiha massacre ends up happening at all. I think he's kind of the mediator between Uchihas as well as the village, which eventually leads to Sasuke not losing his family, which actually would make it so that Sasuke and Naruto are actually good friends. And when Orochimaru gave Sasuke the curse mark, he doesn't use that ability just because he doesn't want to. His will is stronger because he has no reason to want to kill somebody or grow stronger. This helps the village out a ton, and events eventually end up beginning to line up where Konoha just gets stronger and stronger as the days go by. Every single Genin student rises in the ranks faster and faster, and with Naruto's defeat over Sasuke, the 3 Genin who go on to become Chunin are Naruto Uzumaki, Shikamaru, as well as Sasuke. And with that addition of all of them winning, what ends up essentially happening is that the Kage of this present time is actually, since Jiraiya ended up declining the offer of becoming Kage and Kakashi ended up declining the offer of becoming Kage, the person who could rightfully actually become it this time around would be Obito. They never end up looking for Tsunade because the little attack that happened on Konoha, it never happens. The Sasuke retrieval arc, you can forget about it. And the eventual takeover after the 3-year time skip of the Sand Village's Jinchuriki, aka Gaara, doesn't end up happening either. The Akatsuki organization ends up becoming not exactly as dark as it would have in the original. Sure, they became dark for a little while, but once they realized that what they were doing was worse, they chilled out and instead stayed with what their original goals were, bringing peace the right way, not by forcing nations into it, because the plan of the Tsukiyomi doesn't fall into play. Eventually, during the journey that Naruto and Jiraiya would inevitably go on, they end up running into the actual group of the Akatsuki, Yahiko, Konan, and Pain. And with this happening, or actually Yahiko's dead, but Konan and Nagato, they're able to actually convince them both to return back to the village where they can be given a home. Which, once this is all established and a lot of the events that the Akatsuki would have caused to happen in OG Naruto wouldn't happen, because the Akatsuki is basically the entire main villain of the series. With them not being villainous terrorist group, the village isn't really exactly under the same pressure that they were in the original. Instead, the people who they end up having conflict with is other enemy nations, which are pretty much beginning to become very weary of the Leaf Village just due to the fact of how powerful they're getting. They're adding so many more shinobis to their ranks. They even added people such as Kisame, Hidan, Deidara to the village, and were able to actually make them reform. Actually, now I'm gonna say that more of the killer members don't end up actually joining them, so they end up getting people who aren't like that, but people like Deidara, Hidan, Kakazu, stuff like that, they end up going elsewhere and eventually just becoming mercenary ninjas or something like that, right? I think Kakashi honestly would have taken them out during the 3-year time skip just because of how OP he is, and Come on now, Obito, I mean, Kakashi as Gojo is just no diffing everybody. Let's be honest here. So essentially what ends up happening is the enemy ninjas are really the only people who have a real issue with Konoha. So they eventually all end up calling a four Hokage summit where they all discuss what they should do with the village, seeing that they're growing more and more powerful as the days go by, and they're all becoming weary of the Leaf Village. Eventually what ends up happening is those nations get together and they end up essentially devising a plan to crush Konoha in 1 year, training their troops while Konoha is essentially just growing stronger day by day. Naruto was mastering the Nine Tails more and more, and eventually ended up learning Sage Mode from Jiraiya during this time skip, since all of his fundamentals were already polished. Naruto at this point is actually able to unlock KCM1 by the end of the time skip. Kakashi grows stronger, Obito as a Kage makes some amazing decisions, Itachi never leaves the village, and once his symptoms become worse during that 3-year time skip, the village decides ultimately to go find Tsunade so that she could potentially heal Itachi. She goes on to do so, and the village is just stacked. I don't care if the 4 great nations attack. Let's be realistic here. The Sand Village has what? 3 ninjas that they could actually do something against the Leaf Village with, and just a bunch of no-name fodder shinobi. The Stone Village pretty much had no real contributors other than Inoki in the final Great War. The village hidden in the clouds, they were a pretty big thing that the village had to overcome eventually, and the other nation of the Mist, well, they didn't exactly contribute much to the war either. So what I'm going to be saying is eventually they end up coming to a bit of a standstill where the village doesn't exactly just end up destroying the other 4 nations, because they have in mind that just because the military groups want to attack, that doesn't always mean necessarily that the normal people should suffer for it. So essentially they end up forming a treaty which states that they leave them alone and they won't ever attack. They end up telling them that we will genuinely never attack your villages as long as you guys never try this again. You try this again, we will obliterate you, along with all of our ninjas that already outclassed the lot of you. So everything good basically would have happened if Obito lived. That's kind of crazy, because I know this what if is called What If Kakashi Was Gojo's Reincarnation, but it basically just gave us the most OP Kakashi ever, who was able to just no-diff everyone in his path, and then it made me decide to suddenly save Obito, and that was the real domino effect. If had it not been for me saving Obito, basically Kakashi alongside Team 7 would have just no-diffed everybody. What do you guys think of the What If? Did you guys like it? Did you guys hate it? Do you guys think that it could have been so much better? Comment it down below in the comments section, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to share with a friend, as well as hit that red button if you aren't already subscribed. It has been your boy Zether. The sponsor of today's video is going to be playing after this. With that said, I love you all. Peace. As anime fans, we love to show our support to our favorite shows by rocking anime apparel. But something I'm pretty sure we can all agree on is it's so expensive. So I've partnered up with Fandom to bring you all affordable, high quality anime merch that you are sure to love. And if you use my code Zether at checkout, you can even get an extra 10% off the already affordable merch. Keep in mind, it does come from overseas sellers, so its sizing is going to be different since it's overseas. That said, let's get back into the video.